I'm going to list all the different breakout sessions. Apparently people were not quite sure what the sessions were. So I'm going to make a list for you, all the breakout sessions that are happening. I cannot tell you exactly where they are because the names are so different to the names that you're knowing, and it will be hard for you to look for the names. The names are only on the cottage, so you won't find the name. Please ask the volunteers who do know where the cottages are and which session is in which cottage. If you wander around past the cottages, there are leaf plates where the names have been posted as well. So if you see a name and remember that you're going there, that will also help. You have sessions which are being conducted as speaker-run sessions, which are Montessori and the Child, 3 to 6, Tagore on Education, Setting the Scene for Montessori, and a panel discussion on reaching out. Those are more or less formal sessions. You then have informal sessions where you can go and participate, or participatory interactive sessions, which are from 2:15 to 3:15 here in the auditorium. A session on craft as sadhana, an interactive session where you can ask questions, where Laila Taiba will present Indian handicrafts and talk about them, and you can ask questions and interact. A tree walk, which is not here but from near the banyan tree. Tulen, which is a form of martial art which some of us participated in yesterday. Art as sadhana, again an interactive session in the special art area, central in the Dastakar area. Krida, where you can go and look at or participate in traditional Indian games. And Kolam, where you can try your hand at creating wonderful designs on the floor. Just to remind you that they are there. To also remind you about the Montessori Museum, which has pieces of material, diplomas, other documents which you will not see anywhere else in the world, perhaps because they are so special. They are from here, from the time that Montessori spent here. Please do go and find it. I have an important announcement for those of us who have come from different countries. The money changer is here. Another important announcement for people who have come from different countries. Those of you that arranged your hotel stay via the website and therefore had your travel arrangements or the pickup and departure arranged by the hotel need to today go to the transport desk and confirm your departure times, just so that we can be sure that we do get you to the airport on time. My friend has an important announcement.
The drainage system at Kalakshetra is a little bit hard-pressed to handle all the toilet paper that has been flushed down lately. I would like therefore to make a request to use dustbins for toilet paper so that we won't find the toilets blocked when you go there. Thank you very much.
I think most of you know me by sight as the person who keeps you from your lunch break for an extra minute or two. Just two very short announcements. All the proceedings happening here, the text of all the speeches and the reports from the breakout programs will be compiled in a post-Congress journal. And we hope to send them to all of you delegates in the next few weeks. Okay, so we expect that it might take the region of about 3.5 4 weeks. And the other point is that we do have Congress memorabilia on sale. That's at the far end of the list of book publishers and so forth. So that's the last stall there. And they do have books, t-shirts, mugs, and other interesting memorabilia on sale. So enjoy yourselves. Thank you.
Announcement, just to say that Professor Swapan Majumdar, who is leading the session on Tagore on education, has been sitting in the Calcutta fog trying to take off for the last couple of hours, but we hear that the plane is now in the air, and so the Tagore on education might be a bit delayed and will start as soon as he's here. We'll try and keep you posted. Thank you. In Fiji. He's a professor of Indian literature, and there is no person more suited to speak on our poet laureate, our own Rabindranath Tagore, in this venue in Kalakshetra, where Rukmini Devi was so influenced and so akin to his philosophy of life and education. Welcome, sir. We are so happy to have you here today. On behalf of the 26th International Montessori Congress, we welcome you.
You are leaving your mobile. Dear friends, colleagues, and students, it has been almost like coming back home from home for me. As soon as I entered the campus, I thought I'm back to Shantiniketan. Shantiniketan is the place where Tagore located his university, Vishwabharati, and both these words, the name of the institution and the name of the place, have a meaning. Vishwabharati means a place where the world meets in one nest, the east and the west. Shantiniketan, similarly, also has a meaning, and that is the abode of peace. So, peace and learning, these two are brought together in Shantiniketan and Vishwabharati. Sir and madams, I am indeed extremely honored in being invited to come here and speak on Tagore. I have spoken on Tagore elsewhere, but this particular occasion, I think, has a greater dimension and intensity of its own. Of the few intellectuals who spared their time for the renovation or even bringing in revolution in education system, Montessori and Tagore were certainly two eminent personalities. It may be true that the problems as faced by Mother Montessori and Dad by Tagore were of different nature, but even then, I think they had an affinity in ideas. And by affinity in ideas, I would like to emphasize upon the kind of approach and attitude these two educationists adapted for the students. Just now, I have been talking with a friend of a new acquainted friend of mine, and we had been lamenting almost for the overweening interest in science and technology. I have nothing to go against science and technology, but certainly not at the cost of certain human values. And for me, Tagore and Montessori, and of course I would add Gandhi, were such humanists who thought education would be the sole preserve for a humanist tradition. And that is why I think this particular invitation from Kalakshetra means a lot more for me. It is an overwhelming experience for me to be here at a place which was set up by Rukmini Devi Arundel, who also imbibed a lot of influence from Tagore. And I would say Mrs. Arundel worked as an emissary from Shantiniketan, as Asha Aryanayakam and Mariam Aryanayakam did for the Wardha school of Gandhi. I'm sorry, my paper is a longish one. I will try to curb it as far as possible. I have two sections. The first section deals with Tagore's educational approach and ideas, and the second is a comparison between Tagore and Gandhi. If time doesn't permit, I will certainly curtail the later part. You all know that Tagore didn't have a formal school education. In fact, he was put to school, but he didn't like the schooling of the so-called colonial education system, so he gave up time and again. Ultimately, he was admitted to the London University, where his teacher was Morley, Professor Morley of English literature, and Tagore fondly remembered Morley for his lectures on literature and so on. So we might say that Tagore didn't have a very thorough and formal experience of school or collegiate education in colonial India. And again, I feel that it's fortunate for us that he was not grilled out of the colonial education system of British India. The long line of illustrious thinkers on education that includes Rousseau, Pestalozzi, Froebel, Montessori, Grundtvig and Dewey in the West, and Vidyasagar in his own country, tried in their own imitable ways to modify the education system. Tagore wrote a number of articles on education, almost spanning his whole creative life, besides publishing several books, addresses, monographs, pamphlets, and very many letters containing gems of thoughts on the subject. In fact, I don't know of any other laureate from Aeschylus to Eliot who had written primers in 3 languages, Bengali, English and Sanskrit. Tagore did. So you may quite well understand that education, and particularly the education of the little children, had a priority in his schema of things. The poet's father, Debendranath Tagore, stipulated in the trust deed of the Shantiniketan Ashrama to set up a school on the traditional lines of Gurukul Parampara. Accordingly, Balendranath, Tagore's nephew, brought into existence the Brahmachari Ashrama, the precursor of Patha Bhavana, the school modelled after Tapovan style of education in ancient India. After a brief life, it was reborn, as it were, like a phoenix in 1901 under Tagore's supervision. The revival of the ideals of the Brahminic past was soon to be found too restrictive for his own ideas. And this I want to underline, that Tagore didn't have a preconceived notion of education and education pedagogic discipline. Rather, he evolved one by going through a series of experiences. So he was, in my estimation, an experimentalist so far as education was concerned. The re-Christian Brahma Vidyalaya also could not satisfy him until he arrived at a non-connotative name, that is the Shantiniketan school. The Brahma Vidyalaya, we must remember, has a religious connotation in itself. It is basically Hindu. So Tagore started with that, but very soon he found that he must have a kind of a secular education, and the Patha Bhavana or the Shantiniketan school was an attempt for that secular school. Tagore's initiation in educational institution building had begun in 1898 at Shilaidaho. Shilaidaho is almost a village where the Tagores had their estate in East Bengal, now in Bangladesh. It was not indeed a school in the formal sense, but a coaching home organized for the tuition of his son and a few more from among the poor subjects' children of the estate. Now, Tagore thought that the ambience of the home is best suited for education of the children. So, we must strive for bringing about a kind of a homely atmosphere in education. So, this was his first premise, that whatever we do, it must have the warmth of a homely atmosphere. And even if it is a school, the school must have an ambience and warmth of a homely atmosphere. When other bhavanas came up within the fold of Vishwabharati in 1921, it was given a faculty status and was renamed as Patha Bhavana. 23 years experience in school education made him realize the urgent need for pragmatic education and in dissemination among the rural masses, and led Tagore once again to venture in establishing a new school with a new vision, altogether one for the destitute and the weaker sections of the society. So, this was the beginning of a new school when Tagore was already 63 years old. The first one he started at 40, the second one came up at the age of 63. And he was thinking in terms of application of education, learning and then application of that learning on the poorer masses around Shantiniketan. The mission continued till his death. In spite of some common and constant features running through the phases, the venue shifted along with a group of teachers to Shantiniketan in 1901. Though there had been no temporal discontinuity, a close observer may not fail to notice the inherent changes it had passed through under the leadership of Brahmabandha Upadhyay, Manoranjan Bandhopadhyay, down to Ramananda Chattopadhyay. Ramananda Chattopadhyay was the illustrious editor of the Modern Review and Prabhashi. The name of the school also changed from Brahmachari Ashram to Brahma Vidyalaya to Purva Vibhaga and Uttar Vibhaga and there to Patha Bhavana. So, the changes in nomenclature are also indicative of the changes in the thought pattern of Tagore himself. Tagore was simultaneously praised and derided for the absence of a well-defined structural system in his institution. It was in fact a cantilever pattern of education comprising the school, that is the Shishu Vibhaga and the Vidya Bhavana or the research division. I call it cantilever education because they had the school system and then the research system. In between, the intermediate and the graduations were not in Tagore's schema. Now, if we recollect the very layout of the school compound during Tagore's lifetime, we would find the research library located at the very center with two sprawling playgrounds adjacent to it. So, playground and the library, which is the research center, are located almost adjacently. Classes were held all around in the open air. The seats of teachers were fixed and students were given 5 minutes time to move from one class to another, thus having an opportunity to break the monotony of continuous classes as well as to refresh their spirit. The idea was that the little boys would observe the senior scholars spending the whole day at the library, which will be an implicit instance to emulate for them. Nor would the scholars feel distracted by the fun and frolics of the students. Their juvenile enthusiasm would keep them relate their study to life and reality, and existing reality Tagore would never lose sight of. So it was also an education for the scholars that you are not totally divorced from life, you are not totally divorced from the child's play. There must be a kind of a combination of the both, the erudition of the scholar and the spritefulness of the child. He knew full well the uneven standard of the students. As a possible remedy, he improvised a system of mobility among them depending on their merit in a given subject. One who was advanced than the rest was allowed to attend the higher class. Another, who was just the reverse, was asked to take lessons in the lower class and make up the deficiency. Apart from the regular curricular study, it was obligatory for every student to take lessons in fine arts, be that music, painting, or craft. The range of options in elective subjects had no compartmentalization. Arts and science subjects could be opted for simultaneously. It was designed to bring out the latent potentiality of a student as also to let him find for himself the area of his interest. It resulted not only in a reduction in number of total dropouts on the one hand, on the other, it also served as a process of talent search. So nobody knew what the latent talent of a student could be. So Tagore improvised this system that a student will have training in different areas of learning, and ultimately the student all by himself or herself will make out what his real talent consists in. The most important feature, however, was his decision to do away with the practice of examinations that bred, according to him, an undesirable tension arising out of a breakneck competition. So competition was to be assuaged. The basic philosophy underlying the removal of exams was to create a space for the students which would be free from torture of a suffocating process of accumulation and reproduction. Study for the students, he thought, must be as much an enjoyment as the games are for them. As and when they would learn how to derive pleasure from studies or practices of any other arts up to their taste, their learning would turn creative. So creative learning, not only learning but creative learning. For Tagore, creativity did not mean earning an authority in any field of expression. It was essentially an awakening of the mind, an awakening not merely of the hunger for knowledge, but of an awareness of belonging to a social setting, micro and macro at the same time. Even in a text like Shantiniketan, you know, was an anthology of the sermons or rather the lectures he delivered at the temple. I mean, it is not really a temple, there is no shrine there, but it is a hall for congregation where Tagore used to deliver lectures every Wednesday. And these sermons or these lessons were collected in a book called Shantiniketan, which many educated readers think to be a compilation of religious sermons. We come across an article entitled Jagoran or Awakening. This awareness of mind can neither be attained nor created by gathering or disseminating information. I think this is Tagore's farsightedness, that even in the early decades of the 20th century, he could see for himself that accumulation of information is not education. IT, the spell which has almost captivated us now. It can grow only through human contacts. The realization of the ideal of education rests on this spirit of togetherness, another recurrent theme in the cosmology of Tagorean thought. If we analyze the motivations that may have driven an artist in life to become an activist in education, we shall find that something more profound than mere philosophy or philanthropy, a vision must have been working deep in him, that the classes were, or even are still, held at these schools in the open air in a mango orchard or a boculo grove in the natural ambience are but their external features, though learning in the nearest proximity of nature must have had something far more deeply interfused in such a notion, which may seem anachronistic to many today. That it is not so may be exemplified if we try to relieve the ideas and ideals of its founder closely. In his celebrated essay, A Poet's School, Tagore tells us, I quote, "The highest education is that which does not merely give us information, but makes our life in harmony with all existence." End quote. The pronouncement needs elaboration. Information is most certainly a part of education, but it remains to be collected rather than to be created. Collection is not a faculty of the mind or intellection. It is a matter of habit, of cramming, of collation, of putting things together. The so-called good students excel in the exams because they have a knack for gathering information and, of course, displaying it coherently. This tendency leads to showmanship and competitiveness. And competitiveness, when turns out to be intense and aggressive, takes recourse to make everything subservient to itself, seizing its bond with all extant living organisms around oneself. The fundamental object of education then, according to Tagore, would be to substitute competition by collaboration between man and man, man and nature, between man and every other object, animate or inanimate. Excuse me, just a glass of water. Excuse me for that. This awareness of mind can neither be, thank you. Sorry. This awareness of mind can neither be attained nor created by gathering or disseminating information. It can grow only through human contacts. Sorry. Such realization often tends to be abstract. Tagore would also have run the risk of being too elusive and non-ethereal had he not tried to translate his ideas in concrete terms and to give these a form and shape through the discipline and process of practical training. He was explicit in incorporating these aims and objects while formulating the memorandum for Vishwabharati. And I quote, "To study the mind of man in its realization of different aspects of truth from diverse points of view, to bring into more intimate relation with one another through patient study and research the different cultures of the East on the basis of their underlying unity, to seek to realize the common fellowship of study, the meeting of the East and the West, and thus ultimately to strengthen the fundamental conditions of world peace." And that is why I alluded to the meaning of the place name Shantiniketan. The idea and institution of Vishwabharati, what Tagore considered the greatest achievement of his life, was virtually a culmination of that ideal imprinted on his mind at an early age. I leave aside the colonial system of education, which he virtually denied all his life through. The other point that deserves to be remembered is that it will be nothing short of foolishness on our part to believe that Tagore's thoughts were like a monolith ever since he engaged himself in the process of opinion formation. Tagore's experiments in education may perhaps be best analyzed in respect of his other constructive and creative activities, not counting the literary for the time being, namely in experiments with rural reconstruction, creating environmental awareness, or innovative festivities, some apparently diverse and disjointed projects of course not in the management sense of the term, under the megalith of education. And all these were experimented in the hothouses of Shantiniketan and Sriniketan. Sriniketan is the other campus of Vishwabharati. Tagore's search for alternative models of cultures of creativity, and I think this is the key word for Tagore's education, to create a culture of creativity, to create a culture of creativity. Obviously began with his literary and musical compositions. To begin with, it was primarily a matter of establishing one's distinctive features of identity, clearly distinguishable from his predecessors and contemporaries. Gradually, it turned out to be his sole self, spontaneous and uncontrived. The idea of institution building was but an extension of the same urge. The urge, again, was compounded by the necessities arising out of the compulsions of the colonial situation. Tagore's early association with the Congress ended rather prematurely with the exposure of the moderate and the extremist divisions within the party. Curzon's partition of Bengal got him intensely involved in the anti-partition movement, only to be disillusioned by the militancy of bomb, burning and boycott in the aftermath. For Tagore, the ostensible alternative to the Western education was not to jump for indigenous education as a matter of reaction. He was certainly not a nationalist of that breed. All he wanted was to pay back the masters in their own coins. But he would hasten to insist that it must reach the masses and find the roots in our own soil. In Shafalatar Shadupai, in Atma Shakti, he wrote, quote, "Hopeless laments won't do. We shall have to strive for what we ourselves can do. Necessity impels us to take upon ourselves the responsibilities of our education. I know well that it will not be a stone replica of the huge Oxbridge model to be enshrined in our educational establishments. Their infrastructure will be befitting that of the poor, but the living goddess Saraswati, seated on the 100-petal lotus of our reverence, would dispense like a mother the nectar of the children, unlike the wealth-proud merchant wife giving away alms to the beggars from the high balcony." End quote. It would inevitably be an alternative education for the poor, yet without any trace of poverty in thought. Such alternative education would obviously desist from creating a class of subalterns in the colonizer's employment hierarchy, but would do all it could do to generate an ambience of righteousness which would ensure the structuring of a civil society, and that again as an alternative to the nation-state build-up after the Western pattern and superimposed on us. Tagore was not satisfied with creating alternative spaces theoretically. He immediately wanted to have these implemented in practice. It was out of this anxiety that Tagore, after running the school at Shantiniketan for more than 2 decades, decided to set up another school at Sriniketan at a distance of only 3 kilometers. Could the distance be the only reason for such a move? Perhaps not. He knew from experience that the middle or upper middle class border students of Shantiniketan almost refused to mix up with the day scholars from Sriniketan, Shurul and the adjoining villages. This was symptomatic of temperamental differences between the city and the village, affluence and poverty. Tagore wanted his second school to cater to the needs of the surrounding villages. They were trained in vocational arts, from carpentry to weaving, husbandry to harvesting. The community now comprised of students drawn virtually from the same class. both economically and socially. They were asked to extend camp services to the villages on school holidays, instruct the villagers in the rudiments of health and hygiene and the like. The Sriniketan experiment so impressed even the senior members of the community that Tagore introduced without late an adult education program where the school students served as prime reciters or Shordar Poduas. The success was greeted with the enthusiasm of the rural people. It also helped them initially to earn a few bucks during the harvesting and later on by selling their artifacts at the Shilpo Mela or the art fair, also introduced by Tagore and exclusively organized by the Sriniketan students. It developed an organizational skill among them as well. Sriniketan realized what Tagore envisaged as complete education. But the apathy of the Vishwabharati authorities relegated the setup to the second fiddle soon after Tagore's death. I quote again, "A cry has been raised in our country. We shall have nothing to do with Western science. It is satanic. This we of Sriniketan must refuse to say, because its power is killing us. We shall not say that we prefer powerlessness. We must know that power, in order to combat power, power is needed. Without destruction cannot be staved off, but will come all the faster. Truth kills us only when we refuse to accept it." End quote. Tagore might not have accepted the superficialities of modernity, but would have never denied the truth of modernity. As late in his life as in 1925, Tagore was almost obsessed with the idea of mass education. Men and women of the country who were deprived of basic education in their childhood, either for economic reasons or for belonging to remote areas, were planned to be brought under the education scheme under the aegis of the New Education Fellowship. As early as in 1917, Tagore contemplated of bringing out a series of books on basic areas of knowledge with a target readership of non-matriculates of those days. The idea of educational extension program also inspired him to set up the Loko Shiksha Sangsad, which was designed to expand the network of literacy and basic education in the country. The Samsad in this way was simultaneously a council for adult education, mass education, as well as distance education through correspondence. In order to make the project complete in all respects, he also initiated a series of books called Loko Shiksha Granthamala and himself contributed the first book on physical sciences to it. The basic intention of the scheme was to reach out to would-be students in their own home environment rather than forcing them to reach the school. Introduction of exam and study centers throughout the country was also one of the innovative aspects of the system conducted by Vishwabharati. For Tagore, education was most certainly a means of empowerment and yet much more. His vision of a complete man was not a philosophical idea. For him, completeness consists in one's readiness to face any situation with equal poise and weather it. Tagore and Gandhi. I hope it will not be out of place to bring in Gandhi, because let me tell you, Gandhi also had initiated a school system in his Sabarmati ashram in Ahmedabad. But all of you know that after 1929, when Gandhi came out of Sabarmati and decided not to go back there until India had achieved freedom, he never visited Sabarmati again. And his next endeavor in education institution building came up in Wardha in Maharashtra, and this locality was inhabited by the Dalits. So this was, again I should say, the application of education among the Dalits, among the downtrodden, among the untouchables. So the school in Sabarmati was for the middle class students. The school in Wardha was meant for the untouchables or the depraved section of the society. I would like to say that Tagore too had these two phases in his career as an institution builder. Both are called ashramas. As originally conceived, one was planned to be a meeting place of religious believers of different orders, the other to be a center of social service among the untouchables living around the place. Today they represent the rudiments of basic education as envisioned by two almost contemporary personalities living in the same country. In one, the library holds the center stage. In the other, it is the prayer square, that is in Wardha. The playground is laid out adjacent to the library in one. In the other, it is beyond the cluster of huts composing the establishment. Apparently, both look like traditional ashramas, but certainly are not rehashes of the heritage Vidyapits. Both the institutions include a combination of the Kala Bhavana and the Sangeet Bhavana. This is another important feature, that in both the schools or both the ashramas, Kala Bhavana or the faculty of arts and crafts and Sangeet Bhavana, that is the faculty of music, were extremely central to the system. Apparently both look like traditional ashramas, but certainly not rehashes of the heritage Vidyapits. Both the institutions include a combination of the Kala Bhavana and the Sangeet Bhavana. I am talking about Tagore's Shantiniketan and Gandhi's Sevagram. Tagore's Shantiniketan school was started in 1901, as I have already said, Gandhi's Sevagram in 1937. But their preparation started earlier. Tagore's at Shilaidaha and Gandhi's in South Africa and Sabarmati. It must be accepted without much hair splitting that the two savants' primary reputation did not rest on their philosophies of education, nor did they ever strive for formulating a regular philosophy either. It grew from their hands-on enterprises in devising a workable model for themselves. Yet, if both the poet and the activist shared one common anxiety, it was most certainly for education. Living as they did in a colonial situation, the alterity of their ideologies are often attributed to their anti-colonialist, hence anti-British attitude. It is commonly believed that these tenets are etched out to experiment on possible alternatives to the model provided by Western education system. I believe both were in search of a new dispensation in education, not buckled by the state aid, neither Western in toto, nor Oriental in and out. It aimed at a happy and simultaneously judicious combination of the two. The most interesting points, however, were the proportion between the Western and Oriental elements in their thoughts and actions on the one hand, and the third factor of their original contribution on the other. But such bare simplifications blurred the complexities as well as the originality of their positions. Let us accept at the outset that both Tagore and Gandhi were exposed to the best possible Western education available at their times. Because of his family background, Tagore perhaps had a deeper involvement with the heritage of our culture than Gandhi's. At the same time, we must not lose sight of the fact that Gandhi, perhaps, had a greater understanding of the ground realities prevailing in the country at that point of time. No poet of Tagore's eminence had ever composed primers in 3 languages, and that Gandhi never did. No activist of Gandhi's standing from Plato to Russell would ever care to set up basic primary schools as Gandhi did. The school system in the scheme of both the thinkers again was erected on a theistic foundation. Both had in their own individualistic ways drawn up schemes for extension of its field of operation among the rural and the downtrodden people as well. Education, the highest and the noblest form of it, did not consist in the scale of preferences of Tagore and Gandhi in acquisition of information alone. According to them, it would succeed only if it could make our life harmonize with all possible situations of life, the multiforms of meaningful living. Most certainly would they admit information as an essential part of education, but would hasten to add that it is more a faculty of collection rather than of creation. So these are the few areas where they meet. Such a realization often tends to be as abstract as was in the cases of both. The concept of Polli Punargatana or rural reconstruction in Tagore and Gramodyoga in Gandhi were based by and large on similar social values. But the volunteer corps or Bruti Balakas in the former system were also required to document the basic statistics on the living conditions of the people in the adjoining villages they covered. Tagore and Gandhi did not stop short at theoretical formulations. They did their best in translating their ideas into practice, refining their positions time and again, but never completely drifting away from the quintessence of their respective visions of ideal education. Knowledge, says the proverb, is power. Education, a Tagore or a Gandhi would argue, does of course ultimately lead to knowledge and hence to power. But the attainment of the ultimate is not obtainable for all. There are at least 3 stages to reach this state: Patha or learning, Shiksha or education, and finally Vidya or knowledge. Bodhi or wisdom or Jnana or enlightenment is beyond yet dependent on these previous stages. Tagore and Gandhi would rather think of empowerment through education in 2 different ways. For Tagore, true empowerment lies in the awakening of the self, aware enough to decide for oneself the oughts of life, the duty, the desirability, and the good. We shall have to accept that Tagore does not seem to be concerned with the basic problems of opportunity to education. A confirmed pragmatist as he was, for Gandhi, creating a truly congenial ambience of and an open avenue to education was the foremost of the problems to negotiate with. Excuse me. To admit that Tagore's and Gandhi's intended students come from 2 different cultural and economic strata altogether. This also partly explains the debate between them regarding the need and justification for introducing possibilities to earn during the students' years of learning. Gandhi's Nai Talim, the new dispensation, created a space for earning by simple investment of one's labor and thus decide for one's possible future means of livelihood. He knew full well that academic merit could not be expected among the majority of the students. As a result of his experiences at Shantiniketan, Tagore also perhaps realized the necessity of imparting honest labor but not linked with direct personal earning. Interestingly enough, Sheva or cashless service to the less fortunate people around perhaps more an important place in Tagore's second school, Shiksha Shastra, at Sriniketan, than in the first, Pathabhavana, at Shantiniketan. And in Gandhi's second school at Sevagram than in the first at Sabarmati. Tagore and Gandhi believed in disciplining the mind. The concept of discipline had different connotations for them. In Tagore's Pathabhavana and Shiksha Shastra and Gandhi's Sabarmati and Sevagram, the entire responsibility of self-governance was delegated to the students. They were to devise means to deal with any situation that would come their way, be that misbehavior of a fellow student or the maintenance of health and hygiene in the ashrama and its vicinity. Teachers were around watching the team work, but would hardly interfere ever. Yet, if asked to underline the difference between Tagore's and Gandhi's conditions of nursing the budding minds of the students, I would dare say it was the emphasis of the values of beauty and duty, respectively, in their order of priorities. I would never say so in absolute terms, but relatively. In other words, aesthetics and ethics divided their domains. But are the two really so opposed to each other? Ethics, when properly practiced in life, develops an aesthetics of its own. Similarly, as aesthetics, when freed from individualistic confines, produces almost an ethical value. When Tagore wanted to have his students trained in such a way that one could appreciate the play of colors and notes of music and distinguish between one medium or scale and another, the aesthetics of appreciation would structure an autonomous hierarchy of its preferences and values, which in turn would be no less ethical. Gandhi would advise his disciples to turn their back to every evil of life, to abstain from saying, seeing, or hearing anything ill. If honestly pursued, it would produce an equilibrium of aesthetic enjoyment of comparable distribution of emotions. Gandhi, on the other hand, would endeavor to elevate human beings from their basic instincts. Tagore, on the other hand, was firm in his belief that the number of the good always exceeds that of the bad. These not only indicate differences in their visions of life, but also reflect their very own individual personality types that complement one another mutually and vindicate two processes of edification of the mind. Empowerment, according to Tagore and Gandhi, then, would follow two different tracks, one through humane and aesthetic empathy, and the other through economic and moral rearmament. For Tagore, the end of education consists of a wholesome blossoming of the faculties of the mind and the body through learning, work, and service in obtaining what he terms as Atma Shakti, or the self-power, in achieving a rhythm of life. A rhythm of life is a phrase from Tagore. It is evident that such an optimum student will participate in the greater arena of social life, both as a role model as well as through one's services to the cause of the society. In other words, Tagore emphasizes on the inner or the mental empowerment of the student. Not that in Gandhi's scheme of things, the mental aspects are relegated, but for him, the social responsibility of the student, one's readiness to sacrifice self-interest for the sake of it, along with the achieving economic self-sustenance perhaps, are of greater consequence. Students' activities in their schools included indeterminable creative energy, quantifiable productive pursuits, as well as social service and self-governance program. Learning and work, they would argue, must go hand in hand and necessarily be related to the prevailing social system. It is often glibly remarked about Tagore that a poet as he had been, he lacked pragmatic attitude to various systems of life, education in particular. In repudiation of such a position, one may cite what he wrote to C.F. Andrews. I skip here again. Gandhi is primarily concerned with the bunyadi or the basic, that is primary, and secondary school education. Collegiate or higher education does not come within his immediate purview. His basic inclination is most certainly directed towards the vocational education that begins with the takli and leads up to the gospel of the charkha. Charkha is the spinning wheel, as you all know. The takli is even a baser version of that charkha. His basic inclination is most certainly directed towards vocational education that begins with the takli and leads up to the gospel of the charkha. Obviously, the community of students Gandhi had in mind turned up from a section economically weaker than the one Tagore was to deal with in his school. The former's idea of Swavalamban, that is self-reliance, was basically a means to meet the expenses of education of oneself. At the same time, he did not consider imparting a kind of training in doing one's own work as much as of nurturing the softest sentiments through music lessons in any way an inferior assignment. So, Atma Shakti or self-empowerment and Swavalamban or self-reliance are the two basic principles of the two sevens. Here is a quotation in Hindi. Would you understand Hindi? Anyway, I leave it out. And here too, I quoted a phrase from Tagore, rhythm in life. Gandhi also is talking about Jivan Talbat, that is the rhythm of life. So, rhythm in life and rhythm of life. This is the basic difference then between Tagore and Gandhi. Following this inaugural declaration of Gandhi's Vardha scheme or the Nai Talim, Tagore, admitting of Gandhi's practical genius, quipped in strongest words. As the scheme stands on paper, it seems to assume, this is a quote from Tagore, a longish one, that material utility rather than development of personality is the end of education in the true sense of the word, may be still available for a chosen few who can afford to pay for it. The utmost the masses can have is to be trained to view the world they live in the perspective of the particular craft they are to be trained to view the world. Education should be doled out in insufficient rations to the poor, while the feast remains reserved for the poor. I cannot congratulate a society or a nation that calmly excludes play from the curriculum of the majority of its children's education and gives in its stead a vested interest to the teachers in the market value of the people's labor. If Tagore assessed the question of students earning, depriving themselves of their playtime and paying for the teachers' honoraria, Gandhi was no less pained to negotiate the wider question of being declassed as an upshot of academic attainment. Tagore, we shall have to admit, was not much aware of the such evil-some social backlash of a philanthropic enterprise. Tagore and Gandhi, even though did not demean learning English as it was the language of the colonizers, thrusted down our throat, both of them felt that education through mother tongue was most certainly better suited for creating a confidence in articulation as much as in generating conviction of thought. And building self-assurance is an unfailing key for empowerment. Both of them realized that creating an ambience of self-reliance is not confined to the extent of school-going children alone. Even the adults require to be administered boosted doses to bring back their self-possession. The Loko Shiksha or mass education program organized by Tagore and the Uttar Bunyadi projects of Gandhi had almost polygenetic growth, though the Arya Nayakams, Asha and William, were most certainly the connecting links between the two establishments of Wardha and Bolpur. One basic difference in attitude distinguished the both in turn. While Gandhi relied more on imparting lessons in certain particularities of applied social sciences, Tagore wanted to initiate the masses in elementary sciences not merely for the sake of their content so much for the very fact that such exposures would make the mind alert and intelligent, free from illusions. Even from the sketchy account, it may perhaps come to the fore that colossal as their thoughts and ideas were, it is almost impossible to measure their reach of heights and depths where they behaved like an idealist and wither a pragmatist. These words turn hollow to understand them, but the dazzle of their vision beckons us, empowers the powerless like the Foucauldian panopticon. Thank you. Thank you. If time permits, and if you have any questions, would time permit? You have other sessions now, I suppose, isn't it? So, I better stop here and let me express my gratitude to all of you who at the end of a very, very hectic day must have been quite tired, yet were very patient in paying audience to what I have said. I am sorry I had to skip some passages, but I hope I have not mutilated what I was supposed to say. Thank you very much, and my regards again to you.
You could make it. We do appreciate the effort that it took for you to wait so many hours in an aeroplane waiting to take off. Thank you very much for that presentation. Take your seats. To all my friends who are outside, please can you come in and take your seats? Thank you.